The night my son-in-law stood up at my birthday dinner and told me I was being moved along, I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my wine glass, took one slow sip, and nodded at my sister across the table. She nodded back. That was the signal we'd agreed on 3 weeks earlier. I turned 62 in April. My daughter Audrey had insisted on throwing the party. She'd called me in February, voice bright and warm the way it gets when she wants something, and said, "Mom, we're doing this right. A real dinner, your favorite restaurant, the whole family." I told her she didn't have to go through the trouble. She said, "Mom, stop, let us do this for you." I should have known then. Audrey hasn't done anything just for me in about 4 years. I live alone now, have since my husband passed in 2019. We built our house in 1988, 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garden in the back that I've kept going every spring since. It's not a mansion. It's not fancy. But it's mine, paid off, and it smells like the rosemary I grow by the kitchen window and the wood polish I use on the floors every other Saturday. It's the only place in the world where I feel completely like myself. My daughter and her husband, Conrad, live 40 minutes away. They have a nice house, nice cars, nice vacations. Conrad works in finance, something with investments, and he has that particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been wrong in his own mind. He shakes hands too firmly. He laughs a half second before things are actually funny. He has, in the 6 years he's been married to my daughter, looked me directly in the eyes maybe a dozen times. I tried in the beginning. I brought food when they moved into their first apartment. I watched their dog when they went to Cancun. I showed up when they needed me and stayed out of the way when they didn't. I am not a difficult woman. I've never asked for much. But Conrad made it clear, in small ways at first and larger ways later, that I was an inconvenience in the life he was building, a leftover from Audrey's past that he hadn't quite found a way to discard yet. I noticed. I just didn't say anything. That's something people misread about quiet women. They think we don't see. We see everything. We're just deciding what to do with it. The trouble started. The visible trouble, I mean. About 8 months before my birthday, my sister June called me one evening. June is 4 years younger than me, sharp as a tack, and she has never once in her life pretended to like someone she doesn't like. She'd been at a lunch with a mutual friend, a woman who works at the county records office. This friend, making conversation, had mentioned that someone had recently been inquiring about my property, pulling public records, asking questions about title transfers, looking into what it would take to contest a living owner's deed if said owner were to be deemed unable to manage their affairs. "Unable to manage my affairs?" I repeated. "That's what she said," June told me. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up. I am 62 years old. I take a water or boats class 3 times a week. I do my own taxes. I read 2 books a month, and I grow my own tomatoes, and I have never, not once, forgotten the bill or a birthday or a medication. The idea that someone, and I already knew who, was laying groundwork to declare me incompetent was not frightening. It was clarifying. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Claudette, and she's been handling my family's legal matters since before Audrey was born. I told her what I'd heard. She told me to come in. What followed was 8 weeks of very quiet, very thorough preparation. I won't go into all of it, but I will say that by the time Audrey called to tell me about the birthday dinner, I already had a folder 3 inches thick sitting in Claudette's office and a secondary copy in a fireproof box under my bed. I accepted the invitation with a smile in my voice. The dinner was at a restaurant called Harlow's, the kind of place with cloth napkins and menus without prices, which Conrad loved because it let him perform generosity without actually explaining what anything cost. He'd reserved the back room, long table, candles, 14 guests, my neighbors, a few of my old friends from church, Audrey's friends who I've always been polite to, and June seated across from me at my specific request. I wore my dark green dress, the one I wore to my husband's retirement party years ago. The one he always said made my eyes look lighter. I wore it on purpose, as a kind of armor. Some things you put on not for anyone else but for yourself. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Bread, wine, catching up with people I hadn't seen in months. Conrad was in good spirits. That too loud, too expansive mood he gets when he thinks things are going his way. He ordered expensive wine for the table and made a small production of it. He kept touching Audrey's shoulder. She kept smiling. About halfway through the main course, Conrad stood up. I thought he was going to give a toast. I picked up my glass. I want to say something, he started, and then he looked at me. Not at the table. Not at the room. At me. Carol, Audrey and I have been doing a lot of thinking. About family. About the future. About making sure everyone is taken care of as things change. I set my glass down. We feel like the house situation has become something we need to address. You're alone out there. It's a big property for one person. And frankly, he paused, did that half-loft thing. We think it might be time to think about transitioning to something more manageable, something designed for women your age. Silence. One of my church friends made a small sound. June didn't move. We've actually already spoken to someone, Conrad continued, about what a transition like that might look like, financially, logistically, and we think, Conrad. My voice was even. I surprised myself with how even it was. Are you telling me, at my birthday dinner in front of my friends, that you'd like me to leave my home? He shifted, just slightly. We're talking about what's best for you. You're talking about my property, I said. Let's not dress it up. Audrey put her hand on his arm. Mom, please, let's not make this. I'm not making anything, I said. I'm asking a simple question. Is this a birthday dinner or an eviction notice? The room had gone completely still. Conrad's jaw was tight. He'd lost the narrative and he knew it. He's the kind of man who cannot recover once the narrative is gone. I looked at June. I nodded once. She reached into her bag. What June pulled out was a small wireless presenter. The kind used for slideshows. She'd borrowed the restaurant's wall screen under the guise of wanting to show a little tribute video for the birthday girl. The host had been delighted to help. The screen lit up. It was not a tribute video. The first slide was a document, a printed email exchange between Conrad and a property attorney, dated 14 weeks earlier, discussing options for asset transfer in cases of diminished capacity and specifically referencing my address. The second slide was a letter Conrad had drafted, never sent but recovered through channels I won't specify, to a senior living facility, inquiring about availability and pricing for a resident who may not be coming voluntarily. The third slide was a financial document that Claudette had helped me prepare, a completed, signed, notarized deed of transfer. My house in its entirety placed into a family trust naming June as trustee, drafted 6 weeks ago. Untouchable. Uncontestable under state law without years of expensive litigation with no guarantee of outcome. Conrad's face did something I hadn't seen it do before. It went very still. Not calm. Still, like something inside had just stopped. Audrey looked at the screen, then at me, then at the screen again. I've known about the inquiries for 2 months, I said. I wasn't raising my voice. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't performing anger. I was just telling the truth, in my own house. Well, in a borrowed room, but with the same composure I've been practicing my whole life. I had a conversation with my attorney before I agreed to come tonight. Everything is already done. The house is not available. It will never be available, and any further legal action on your part will be met with a countersuit for financial elder abuse, which in this state carries both civil and criminal exposure. I'd memorized that last part. Claudette had written it out for me on an index card. I came tonight, I continued, because I wanted you to know that I know. I wanted there to be witnesses, and I wanted to have the salmon, because I haven't been here in years, and it's very good. Someone laughed. I think it was my neighbor. It broke the tension just enough. Conrad sat down. He didn't say another word for the rest of the night. He didn't look at me. He stared at the tablecloth like it had answers in it. Audrey cried, quietly, into her napkin for about 20 minutes. I watched her. I felt something watching her. Not satisfaction, not coldness, but something heavier and sadder than either. She is my daughter. She grew up in that house. She used to sit on that wraparound porch and do her homework and yell at me to bring her lemonade. Somewhere between then and now, she let someone convince her that the right move was to take the porch out from under me. I don't know how you come back from that. I don't know if you do. June drove me home. We didn't talk much in the car. We're the kind of sisters who can sit in silence without it meaning anything bad. She walked me to my door, checked the locks the way she always does, and hugged me for a long time on the porch. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. Ask me in a week. She laughed. I laughed too. It felt strange and necessary at the same time. Inside, I stood in my kitchen for a while. The rosemary was on the windowsill. The floors were clean. The house was quiet in the way I've come to love. Not empty, just peaceful. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair I've sat in for 30 years, and I thought about what it means to have fought for something without anyone seeing you fight. That's the thing no one tells you about protecting yourself quietly. You win, but there's no applause. There's just the sound of your own house around you and the knowledge that it's still yours. That was 7 months ago. I haven't spoken to Conrad since. I don't expect to. Audrey called once, about 3 weeks after the dinner. The conversation was short and not productive. She said I had humiliated her. I told her I had protected myself. She said I should have come to her first. I told her she had come to me at a birthday dinner in front of 14 people with a printed eviction plan. The call ended without resolution. I think she expected me to apologize. I have been thinking about why I couldn't, and I think it comes down to this. I have spent my whole life apologizing for taking up space, for being in the way, for not being what someone needed me to be exactly when they needed it. At 62, after everything, I don't have any apologies left in me for simply refusing to disappear. Maybe that makes me difficult. I've heard worse. Conrad, I learned through Claudette, consulted 2 additional attorneys after the dinner. Both told him the trust was airtight. He hasn't made any further moves. I don't think he will. Men like Conrad only push when they think the door will open. Once it's clear it won't, they find another door. I feel sorry for whoever's on the other side of the next one. What I want to say, if you've made it this far with me, is something I wish someone had said to me 20 years ago. You are allowed to see what's happening. You are allowed to prepare quietly before anyone knows you're preparing. You are allowed to love someone and still refuse to let them take from you. Love is not the same as surrender. Kindness is not the same as blindness. Being a good mother, a good woman, a good person, none of that requires you to hand over the thing you built your life inside of. I still live in my house. I still do water aerobics on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I still grow my rosemary and polish my floors and sit in my chair at the kitchen table. June comes over for dinner every other Sunday, and we watch whichever crime drama she's currently obsessed with and argue about who the killer is. It's a good life. I made it myself. I kept it myself. And I had the salmon, which was, as I remembered, absolutely worth it. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually costs to be a quiet person in a loud world. Not quiet in the way people mean when they call a woman passive or too soft to fight back. Quiet in the deliberate sense. Quiet because you've lived long enough to know that the loudest response is rarely the most effective one. What Conrad didn't understand, what he couldn't have understood, because it requires a kind of patience he's never had to develop, is that I had been watching him for years, long before he ever started making phone calls to property attorneys, long before Audrey started looking at me differently. I was watching, and I was filing things away, and I was waiting to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I moved a single inch. That's not passivity. That's intelligence. And I think there's a version of my younger self that didn't know the difference. When I was in my 30s and 40s, I confused being kind with being accommodating. I thought if I stayed generous, stayed patient, stayed available, the people around me would eventually match that energy. Some did. But some people, and Conrad is one of them, read generosity as weakness. They see a door left open and they don't think, how kind. They think, how convenient. I gave him years of open doors. He spent those years measuring the square footage of what was behind them. What happened at that birthday dinner was not just about a house. I want to be clear about that. It was about what I'd allowed to go unaddressed for too long. Every time I swallowed a comment, every time I smiled through a dismissal, every time I told myself, he doesn't mean it that way, I was making a small deposit into an account Conrad was eventually going to try to cash out. The house was just the withdrawal slip. The thing about cause and effect is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send a warning. You make choices day after day, and those choices build a reality, and then one day that reality shows up at your birthday dinner with a printed plan to take you home. Conrad's choices built a man who believed women like me could be managed. My choices eventually, finally, built a woman who had already spoken to an attorney before she RSVP'd yes. I don't have any anger left about what he tried to do. What I have is a clear understanding of how it happened and a commitment to not letting the same conditions form again. That means saying things earlier. It means letting people feel the weight of what they've said instead of smoothing it over for everyone's comfort. It means trusting my own observations instead of spending months talking myself out of what I can see plainly. Audrey is my daughter. I love her in the way that doesn't go away, regardless of what a person does. But love doesn't require me to pretend. It doesn't require me to make her feel comfortable about choices she made that were genuinely wrong. Real love, the kind that has any chance of lasting through difficulty, has to be honest. Even when honest is hard. Even when honest means sitting across from each other in a restaurant while a slideshow runs on a wall screen and neither of you knows quite how to look at the other. I kept my house. More than that, I kept myself. And I'll take that every time over the alternative.